This is the Holy Gospel according to John, the first chapter. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." This is the gospel of the Lord. In our Old Testament reading, we meet Samuel, who is a 12-year-old boy who was living with his teacher Eli in the temple. So if you didn't watch the video from our Old Testament reading from 1 Samuel, you can go back and watch that video, or you can go back and just read the words, because I'm going to be talking about Samuel today. So Samuel is living in the temple with his teacher, Eli, and one night, as he's trying to sleep, he hears a voice call his name. And he assumes that it is his teacher, Eli, calling him. So he gets up and he goes to Eli and says, "Here am I, you called." Eli says, "Nope, I didn't. Go back to sleep." So Samuel goes back to sleep, but it happens again. He hears someone call his name and he goes back to Eli, but again, Eli sends Samuel back to bed. And then again, Samuel hears someone call his name. So again, he goes back to Eli. But by now, Eli knows. Eli knows whose voice Samuel has been hearing. So he says to Samuel, "No, I did not call. Go back to sleep. But if the voice comes again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. That's what Samuel was supposed to say. So then when Samuel hears the voice again, he says, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And the rest of the story, as they say, is history. The young boy who heard God that night responded to the divine call, and he went on to become God's messenger to Israel, ranking in the eyes of the faithful with Moses and Abraham. Now, this is a wonderful story of how God called Samuel. The word call is used in the church quite a bit, and it's a word that I don't often hear outside of the church in the context I'm using it today. When I say that God called Samuel, I mean that God chose Samuel for a particular purpose. God had something that God needed Samuel to do. Now, interestingly, the word church in Greek, it's ekklesia, that means to call out. So as church people, like Samuel, we are called. Each of us are chosen by God for a particular purpose. And we all live into that purpose differently. We all live our callings differently. As a church and as children of God, we know that we are called to love God and to love each other. Being the church, being called, means that we live into the love that God gives us and invites us to share with others. We are called by God. Now, what that looks like and how we live that out is different for each of us. And a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to figure out what God is calling them to do, because it can be difficult. And Samuel's story shows us that. He and his teacher Eli, they had a hard time recognizing the voice of God. Now, my nieces are going to help share the story of God calling Samuel with you, and they're going to share the story with you as I imagine it might have happened. Samuel.
What is it, Eli? What do you need me for? I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Okay.
Samuel.
What is it, Eli? What do you need me for? I didn't call you. Go back to bed.
Samuel.
What is it, Eli? What do you want me for? Maybe it's God. Next time say, here I am. Okay.
Samuel.
Here I am, God. I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Now, do you think Samuel and Eli seemed super happy in that version of the story? They didn't, did they? There was some frustration, exhaustion, and confusion involved. There was also some humor in there. It's kind of hard to hear it though. There was some giggles from the one on the couch who thought her sister was being pretty hilarious. And we did have fun doing this together. This story has a lot to teach us. Like God's call comes to us like that sometimes, with some humor and fun, and also some frustration, exhaustion, and confusion. The rest of Samuel's story wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, because the message that Samuel got from God was a word of severe judgment, which shows us that sometimes what God calls us to do is hard. Sometimes hearing God is hard. Sometimes following what God tells us is hard. Sometimes the message God gives us is hard. Sometimes just being the church and being a loved child of God is hard because we have so much work to do. Right now, we stay home to keep our neighbors safe, and that can be hard. And we also make sacrifices so that people in our community can be healthy, because almost 4,000 people a day now are dying in our country. That's one person about every 23 seconds. And these are people who would have had more time with us if they didn't get sick with COVID-19. That's a lot of loss. As children of God and as a church, we are called to care for those around us and to love our neighbors above everything else, even when it's inconvenient for us. And that is hard. We are also called to do hard things like speak up for those who are oppressed and marginalized, and to speak out against things like racism and white supremacy. And we never defend hate and violence. We never find reasons for why it is okay for people to suffer or be in pain. Because as children of God and as a church, we are called to do better. So yes, sometimes this work is hard and frustrating and exhausting and confusing. And sometimes it is fun and gives us joy. Like whenever Maddie does the children's moment, it gives me joy. She's a college student with a lot of work to do, and she can still share the good news of God's love with us. And whenever I see someone share our worship service with friends, or whenever I hear a story of how many people our online worship reaches, I'm full of joy. When I see all the different faces who help, and when I hear songs that I love, and when I know that we are all connected in some way right now, it gives me joy. And I'm full of joy when I hear about how people are caring for others, planning on getting vaccines, doing their part to promote health in our community in some way. And I'm full of joy when I hear how people are checking in on neighbors and caring for each other. What we can learn from Samuel today is that God calls us. Sometimes we hear it, sometimes we don't, and sometimes it takes us some time to figure it out. But God keeps trying to get our attention. And when we hear God, we have a job to do. It might be awesome, it might be hard, it might not be what we expected, but we are never alone in this work. Samuel had Eli, and in our gospel reading, Nathaniel had Philip. We have each other, fellow loved children of God who are on this journey with us, which for some of us means more now than it ever has before. And we are finding creative ways to do God's work together these days. Remember that the word church means to call out. So we can live with confidence knowing that we can still thrive as a faith community when we are not in our church building, because we are called out into the world to do God's work. I know it isn't easy, but we are doing it. And we will keep doing it because we are called by God to love each other. As called children of God, we can love each other even when it is really hard, because we are loved. We are loved by a God who gives us the grace and hope and life we need to do this hard and joy-filled work, which is why right now we say the words that Samuel said, "Here I am, Lord, speak, for your servant is listening." But we say it with our masks on and from a safe distance. Amen.